Hello and welcome to the Flourishing Introvert Talks with me, Jo Rawbone. This is the podcast that celebrates the natural gifts of introverts so that we can flourish in all situations. Episode 297. The Introvert's Unfair Advantage. People used to say, "You're too quiet by half. You need to make yourself heard if you want to achieve anything in life." And for too many years, I believed them. I thought my calmness, my love of quiet reflection, and my measured, thought-through contributions were a weakness, a problem to fix. Until, that is, I chose to change my thoughts, because it turns out the only real problem here was me believing this nonsense. So here's what I now believe. The very traits that make me different to the loudest, most outspoken people in the room are the very same traits that make me effective and uniquely me. Given the strength and reach of the myths and misunderstandings that surround introversion, the title of this episode may have a few people scratching their head. Introverts? Having an unfair advantage? Have you lost your mind, woman? If you're experiencing some disbelief right now, it's because we've been subjected to a series of big fat lies. Lies that only serve to perpetuate the myths and keep the bias intact. Lies that keep us in a state of self-doubt. Well, stuff that. I've spent too long in that particular state, and I work with others banished to those inhospitable, barren lands not to stand up and declare that it's a rogue state. More importantly, we can leave any time we choose, and it really is your choice. So stick with me through this episode and prepare to be both amazed and persuaded as I hand you your travel papers so you can leave the state of self-doubt. Let's face it, the time has come to leave that state behind once and for all. Ready? Firstly, let's unpack the title a little in order to explain why I think it's such a great reframe. As humans, we are meaning-making machines, so the only thing stopping us from treating our strengths and talents as an unfair advantage is conditioning, habit, and a fear of what others might think. Who are we to buck the trend and bust convention? Actually, who are we not to is the better question. Taking this stance is not arrogance, it's alignment. It's the quiet yet deeply felt recognition and intrinsically held belief that what comes naturally to us is not random or a weakness. Not better than others, not less than or worse than in some way. Just uniquely us. And in order to achieve this, we first need to lay the foundations for a mindset shift. Even if no one has explicitly said that we're inferior or less than our extroverted colleagues, pretty much every piece of feedback, can you see the air quotes I'm using as I say that? Every exclusion, be it a meeting or a promotion, and every criticism about us preferring quiet to banal socialising says it anyway. And if it's been going on for any length of time, in my case it was more than 30 years before I saw the light, it's hard not to buy into those views. Self-doubt has a symbiotic relationship with inferiority. The one feeds the other, and they both depend on each other. Nasty little pairing, if you ask me. And if you're a regular listener, you'll have gathered by now that my go-to resource for anyone needing to ditch their inferiority complex is Caroline McHugh's TED Talk, The Art of Being Yourself. So if we're serious about recognising our natural strengths and talents as unfair advantages, the first thing to do is to find our interiority. This means being self-led and operating from our own inner compass rather than being socially led where we try to live up to others' often biased expectations of us. It's when we stop comparing ourselves to others. That's the territory of inferiority and superiority. We simply need to honestly catalogue our strengths. Now is not a time for modesty, and understand how they add value to our own and other people's lives. When I did this for myself, yes, everything I share with you has come from my own lived experience, meaning I've tried and tested it. Here are some of the natural talents that I now appreciate give me an unfair advantage. As I describe each one, I'll also explain how it gives me an advantage. Firstly, I don't need other people to be able to recharge. The advantage this gives me is that I am more self-sufficient and less needy. I know from feedback that leaders and friends really appreciate that about me. I'm familiar with what recharges me and what doesn't, and as I mentioned in a much earlier episode, doing nothing is not replenishing for me. Next, deep listening, which involves active, empathic and generative listening, is one of my innie powers and something I've never had to work at. This means in the boardroom or important meetings, I miss very little of what goes on, which is super helpful in leadership, relationship building and sales. Next, my think, say, think communication process, where I take my time to respond, means I rarely regret anything I've said, and that's because it's thought through and intentional. This makes communication cleaner and less ambiguous. Let's face it, there's already too much unwarranted conflict as a result of unclear communications. The advantage this provides me with is that I'm far less likely to get caught up in or start random arguments. More importantly, I can stand my ground and stand full square behind my position. Next, like many other introverts, I love my own company, which means I am never lonely on my own. This is particularly important right now, bearing in mind we're constantly hearing that we're knee-deep in a loneliness epidemic. In fact, I'd go so far as to say the epidemic doesn't and is unlikely to affect we introverts, but I can see why it might be a problem for extroverts. This makes it another example of the prevailing bias and where I have advantage. Next, I don't know what it is to be bored, as there is always somewhere to be in my mind, an idea to follow or something to ponder. I'm a change agent by profession and by proclivities, it turns out. And just to be clear, that's not the same thing as overthinking, though. It's about pure reflection and creative imagineering. This next one is a biggie for me. External validation matters less now, although it took me to get to middle age with the confidence and sassiness that aging brought to really let go of that one. I adore Byron Katie's advice that whatever other people think of me is none of my business. There is so much empowerment and advantage that comes from not minding what others think. It's totally liberating. The advantage this brings is that I'm not constantly seeking reassurance and I'm prepared to be a bit of a tall poppy. Finally, this is one that many of we introverts share, so get out of your own way and own it if needed. Because I only speak when I have something of value to add, I'm less likely to bore people with trivia and hog the limelight. This creates a more equitable and inclusive environment in which others have space to shine, and that is at the heart of pretty much everything I'm doing. So there are the initial 7 that I identified for myself, and I'd love to know which of those you can take ownership of too. Better still, what else have I not mentioned here that gives you an unfair advantage? And for the really bold, which natural talents are actually your secret weapon and the one you'll stop hiding and unleash on your world this week? So the next time somebody wants to level your quietness at you as a criticism, rather than getting embarrassed, angry, or apologising for who you are, understand that you're using your quietness as a filter in order to enhance your impact. Your quietness is intentional, strategic, and impactful. This is you in observer, strategist, and facilitator mode, all of which the world needs more of. And as a very precious soul, Magnus says, it's time to hand over the floorbacks that were gifted you from other people's perception. That's their reality, not yours, and they are welcome to hang on to them if they must. But once you start demonstrating how your talents are an unfair advantage, they'll soon change their perception. Not all gifts are meant for keeping. And given how powerful this topic is, it will definitely make its way into the Flourishing Introvert playbook. Watch out for the masterclasses to find out more about that. Make no mistake, this shift towards recognising your unfair advantages is an act of quiet yet sassy rebellion. And as others experience you reframing your natural talents, they will be inspired to do similarly. That's how we get close to the tipping point that shifts the bias. And I'm here for that. If you enjoyed this episode as much as I did, then please subscribe, rate us and leave a comment, because we know that helps other people find the podcast. And if other people find us, other introverts can flourish.
You are listening to an Intentional Media Production podcast.